It is 6 o'clock on January 23rd, 2023. I will call this meeting of the Chelmsford Select Board to order. Would you please join me in the pledge? To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, Mike Barrett's on.
Yeah, Senator Barrett joined us in the Zoom room too. So for the record, this evening, Board Member Wojcik is participating over Zoom, and we have the rest of the board members in the room. First up, we'll start with our public service announcements. Ken?
Sure, we have a few tonight. The first one, free at-home COVID tests. There are free at-home COVID tests available at the Chelmsford Town Hall, in the main library, in the senior center. The expiration dates have been extended and can be validated by visiting the website on the test kit box if you have any questions when you pick it up and you realize that the date on the box may not say it's still good. Our next announcement is on a Narcan location. So do you know someone suffering from substance or use disorder? The Chelmsford Health Department is proud to announce a new Narcan distribution program. Narcan will now be available at the following locations for those who may need it. Those are at the Chelmsford Main Library, the main branch, Chelmsford Police Station, Chelmsford Center for the Arts, and all Chelmsford Fire Departments. Next up, we have a Narcan training, free Narcan training, and how to identify, recognize an overdose, and save a life. Do you know how to recognize an opioid overdose? Would you feel comfortable administering Narcan to someone who is overdosing? The Chelmsford Health Department will be hosting a free Narcan trainings for anyone who would like to learn more about the opioid overdoses and how to save a life during using Narcan. The first two training sessions will be at the Chelmsford Town Hall, down in the lower level, room LL06 on February 7th. There will be an afternoon session and an evening session. Stay tuned for additional dates. And last but not least is a Care Solace announcement, mental health referral service for our Chelmsford residents and employees of Chelmsford. And it's not uncommon for individuals to need additional mental health support after the hustle and bustle of the holidays is over. Care Solace is a free service available to Chelmsford residents to assist them in finding a mental health provider. Please visit careSolace.com/Chelmsford-MA or call 888-515-7881 if you or a loved one needs assistance finding a mental health or substance abuse treatment provider. Remember, it's okay to ask for help. Those are public service announcements.
Thank you. So can the people in the Zoom room hear us? You can? Okay, Chelmsford Telemedia, I see people speaking in the Zoom room, but there's no sound on this end.
Okay, can you not?
Oh, now I can hear. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I just want.
Can Pat speak?
Pat, can you say something?
Okay, yeah, I didn't hear you call to order, but I can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah, it looked like you guys weren't connected in when we called to order. So next up, we have public input. If you are here for the NIMCOG North Chelmsford truck traffic briefing, we'll have a separate public input segment for that. So is there anybody who would like to speak on public input on a topic other than North Chelmsford truck traffic? Okay, seeing none, we'll go on to committee vacancies.
The list is getting shorter. Yep. So here we go. Committee vacancies for January 23rd, 23. Arts and Technology Education Fund is looking to fill one unexpired 3-year term. Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee has one 3-year term. CCA Advisory Committee, 2 seats available. Those are 1-year terms. Commissions on Disabilities has one 3-year term. Community Action Program Committee has 4 1-year terms. Community Preservation Fund Committee has one 3-year term. Council on Aging looking to fill 2 seats. Those are 3-year terms. Cultural Council, one unexpired 3-year term. The Holiday Decorating Committee has 2 1-year terms available. Parade Committee, all applicants are welcome, and you would serve a one-year term. Those end each July 31st. Permanent Building Committee is a 1 3-year term. Recycling Committee has one 1-year term, and Roberts Field Advisory Committee is looking to fill one seat to a 1-year term. If you're interested in serving on a town board or committee, please complete an online application available at the town website, or you can reach out to the town manager's office by phone at 978-250-5202, or via email at tmoffice@chelmsfordma.gov.
Thank you, Ken. So next up, we have the Northern Middlesex Council of Governments briefing on their analysis of the North Chelmsford heavy truck traffic. Before Paul introduces NIMCOG, for the board's benefit, Attorney Paul Haverty is in the Zoom room if you have any questions you would like to ask him in this forum. I'd also just like to welcome our state legislators and thank you very much for coming for this in our next segment. In the room here, we have House Representative Simon Cataldo. We expect to join us very shortly in the room here, House Representative Rodney Elliott. In the Zoom room, we have House Representative Jim Arciero. From Congresswoman Trahan's office, we have Maria, I don't know how to pronounce your last name, Siniotis, okay. And we also have State Senator Michael Barrett. So thank you all very much for coming. And Paul, I'll turn the introduction over to you.
Great. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. And thank you for those who have come out on such a challenging traveling evening with the snowfall that's out there. And again, want to thank those who are taking their time to join us, particularly our legislative delegation. Over the past several months, Justin Howard has, as Transportation Director for the Northern Middlesex Council of Governments, has sort of taken on the challenge of examining the traffic issues along Ledge Road and the Groton Road, Route 40 area through funding provided, actually through the legislature, through their, it used to be called the District Local Technical Assistance Funding Program as part of the Regional Planning Agency. And this evening, Justin is here to present his findings, as well as in being ably assisted by his transportation planner, whose name, if you thought Maria's name was challenging, Virginia, I'm not even going to try this one. So, but we again, thank you. The board has received the report in advance, and thank you, Justin, for getting that out, and we have sent it to our delegation. So with that, I'll turn it over to you at this point. Thank you, Justin.
Hey, thank you, Paul. Thank you, Paul, for that introduction. As he said, my name is Justin Howard. I am the Transportation Director with the Northern Middlesex Council of Governments. And here with me tonight is easily said Shravanti Gopalan Narayanan. And she is one of our transportation planners, and she did a lot of work on this project, and will be doing much of the presentation here tonight. So I just want to thank the board for allowing us to come here tonight. I know it's a really nice night to be out. And,
Thank you for making the trip.
but we're glad to, we're just in Lowell, so we're glad to come down. So we have a short presentation on the findings of a study that the town requested of us, is to look into the increase in heavy vehicle traffic and on and around Ledge Road in the North Chelmsford area. And that includes places like Dunstable Road, Swain Road, as well as Groton Road. And this is mainly due to increased heavy vehicle volumes from increased quarrying operations at businesses along Ledge Road. Next slide, please. So some background on the project itself before we get into the findings. So back in 2017, the town requested NIMCOG to begin traffic monitoring on Ledge Road due to some complaints from residents in the area. And this was leading up to a townwide transportation forum that occurred, I believe, in 2018. And as part of that, we provided our traffic data to the town. And we decided to continue to monitor the area each year through basically 2022, our last year of traffic counting. And we'll talk about the changes in traffic demand here as part of this presentation. But in 2022, as Paul said, the town applied for and received what we call a district local technical assistance grant to look into Ledge Road area issues in more detail. And on the heels of that, the state delegation also provided a letter to NIMCOG asking the agency to investigate further. So that's what we've done, and that's why we're here tonight. And tonight we'll go over 4 options which are going to be familiar to some of you. And so we pursued these options and looked into them further, and we've had conversations with the Massachusetts Department of Transportation, Chelmsford staff, as well as Westford. And with that being said, I want to turn it over and go on to the next slide, and I'll turn it over to Shivanti to walk you through the study.
Thank you, Justin. Good evening, Chair. My name is Shivanti Gopalan Narayanan. I'm a transportation planner at Northern Middlesex Council of Government. We are now looking at the percentage of trucks on area roadways around Ledge Road. So these graphs were summarized based on the average annual daily traffic and truck percentages for various locations near Ledge Road between 2017 and 2022. So first, Swain Road south of Dunstable Road was monitored from 2017 through 2022, except 2021. And the truck percentage in May 2017 was 16.5%, which then reduced to 6% in September 2017. However, there has been some increase in truck traffic with 34.2% in May 2022. Swain Road north of Groton Road location was monitored in 2018, 19, and 2022. The truck percentage in November 2018 was 5.9%, which then increased to 10% in May 2019 and to 28.8% in May 2022. Next is Route 40 east of Route 3 northbound. This location was monitored in 2018, 2020, 2021, and 2022. And as you can see, the graph, it has increased from 2.1% in September 2018 to 9.5% in September 2020, which then dropped a little bit to 8.3% in May 2021. But the latest data shows that the total truck traffic is 17.6% in May 2022. Next slide, please. So the other 2 locations that we looked at is Dunstable Road east of Ledge Road. And this was monitored in 2018, 2019, and 2022. The truck percentage in November 2018 was 10.3%, which reduced to 9.8% in May 2019. But the latest data shows that there is 18.4% of total truck traffic as of May 2022. The final location that we looked at is Ledge Road south of Dunstable Road, which was monitored in 2017, 2018, 2019, and 2022. The total truck percentage was 13.7% in May 2017, which increased to 26.8% in October 2017, which dropped to 19.4% in December 2017. But the latest data shows that there has been an increase, steady increase to 58.2% in May 2022. So based on these data, we infer that there has been significant increase in truck traffic over this period of time. Next slide, please. Let's now look at the different options and their barriers. So as alternative option 1, NEMCOG staff met with MassDOT District 4 to discuss option to build a new interchange near Ledge Road, providing direct access to Route 3. even though Route 3 is not an interstate highway, MassDOT adheres to Federal Highway Administration interchange justification criteria and recommends exhausting the other alternatives prior to considering a new interchange. And it was noted that an interchange at this particular location violates the 1 mile spacing requirement for interchanges in urban settings. And during the meeting, the group agreed that a proposal for the interchange should benefit the general public, which in this case, it is mainly a private developer. In addition to that, an interchange could bring in more vehicles to the area, so that's another barrier. In order for projects to be eligible for inclusion in the Regional Transportation Improvement Project, as we shortly call TIP, or State Transportation Improvement Projects, TIP, the project must be presented to and approved by MassDOT Project Review Committee, which in this case, MassDOT believes that the project to include a new interchange at Ledge Road would not be approved by the committee due to both design and potential adverse impacts of the project. Next slide, please.
Justin, do you want to take questions on each option or at the end go back?
Either way, it's fine with me. We were just going to go through the
Okay, well,
presentation
then we'll go
and
back.
then take it. Yeah.
Yep, thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So as alternative option 2, we looked at Commerce Way as a potential option to take some truck traffic, which is Commerce Way is one of the internal roadways in this area. And when looking at the distance that these trucks take to access Route 3 via Ledge Road, it is approximately 2.2.
We lost you.
Sorry?
They lost the sound in the Zoom room.
The audio is going in and out.
Oh, can they fix this?
I thought Pete had. I can check with,
Hold on, we're just going to check with Chelmsford Telemedia.
Can't work in these conditions.
Excuse me. Commercial Way. Is that,
They can't hear you, so
Commerce Way.
we're going to...
just wanted to.
Oh, it's Commerce Way in the charts.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just, I wasn't sure where it was. That's what-
It's in Westford.
Hmm?
It's in Westford.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's
Commerce Way is the Newport Materials Road.
Oh, going up the road, okay.
It's one of those two internal.
Okay, can you hear us okay in the Zoom room?
Yes.
Okay, let's go ahead. Sorry
Thank you
about
for
that.
letting us know. So alternative option 2 is to move the vehicles through Commerce Way, which is one of the internal roadways. And when looking at the distance that these trucks travel to access Route 3 via Ledge Road, it is approximately 2.2 miles from the town line to Ledge Road via, from town line to Route 3 via Ledge Road. Whereas if these trucks were to take Route 3 via Commerce Way and Groton Road, then the distance is approximately just 0.34 mile. So meeting with Town of Chelmsford and Westford, we learned that any changes to access at Groton Road or Commerce Way would require a change in existing permit, which results in going back to the court due to the current restriction. Next slide, please. Option 3 is similar to option 2, but to move vehicles through Wardway, which is kind of parallel to Commerce
We're
Way.
losing you again.
I don't know what to do. I can let Kurt know it's still a problem.
Yeah,
Is it everybody or just?
the sound is dropping in the Zoom room.
Somebody's going to join the room and be like, what's going on?
No, Pete just joined. Pete Padula.
Pete Padula is logged in. You may see him on the Zoom as well.
Okay.
So he's-
Try to monitor it.
So Zoom room, can you hear us at the moment?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Meeting with Town of Chelmsford and Westford, we learned that any changes to access at Groton Road and Commerce Way would require a change in the existing permit as well, which would result going back to the court due to the current restriction. Moving on to option 3. So the option 3 is to move vehicles through Wardway, and the existing permit does not allow the use of Wardway as an access to Groton Road, and Wardway is monitored and blocked with a number of physical barriers preventing the use of this particular roadway, and there's also quarterly inspections are done quarterly and are conducted to ensure that there are no new accesses developed. So similar to option 2, option 3 also has the challenge of going to the court again in case of any changes to the roadway. Next slide, please. So in order to control and reduce the number of trucks using Ledge Road, Swain Road, and Dunstable Road, implementing permit restrictions on the number of vehicles or restricting the number of hours available for use is yet another option. There are other businesses in North Chelmsford which also use Ledge Road to access Route 3. So having some particular restrictions on these businesses could potentially decrease the number of trucks that use Ledge Road. And subject businesses under discussion are in Westford, thus are not under Chelmsford jurisdiction, but Ledge Road, which the truck traffic has the most effect on, is in Chelmsford. So that's another barrier. Next slide, please. So this slide gives us an overview of the different options and their barriers, just to give us a sense of how they differ from each other. Next slide, please. So to conclude, with potential facilitation assistance from NEMCOG staff to potentially address the next steps, Town of Chelmsford and Westford should review alternate options and consider methods to improve the overall impact of truck traffic on Ledge Road and surrounding areas in North Chelmsford and East Westford. NEMCOG will continue to monitor traffic volumes and truck percentages in this area with the goal of providing traffic volume information and tracking any changes in conditions in Chelmsford and Westford. Next slide, please. So this slide has our contact information. Please feel free to reach out to us for more information. We can be reached at 978-454-8021. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shravanti.
We can take questions now.
Do you want to take questions one option at a time and then overall questions, clarifying questions on the options?
We'll take any questions.
Okay. So does anybody have any questions or comments on option 1? If not, I do. So,
Well, State Senator Barrett here. I don't specifically have a question limited to option 1, but I wonder if some sort of scoring's been done to prioritize the least of these troubled options. Granted that all 4 seem to have some significant barriers, is there a preliminary judgment on the part of those who've studied this closely as to which option has the fewest and offers the largest chance of success? Is there kind of a step down whereby the least obstructed option is X and the next obstructed, et cetera,
Well,
is Y?
we didn't particularly score the different options. We just looked at the different barriers and wanted to summarize those. The option with the most issues, in my opinion, is the new interchange, which even if you could get it approved by MassDOT and gone through the project review committee process and initiating a project with the state, you're still looking at probably 10 years if everything works perfectly in there. You got a lot of issues with the right-of-way, you got a lot of issues with environmental permitting, and you've got issues with just infrastructure design in the area, which would affect how that project would move forward. So we did not get a lot of good feelings from MassDOT when we talked to them, and we talked about several different kinds of alternatives, and they didn't really want to address specifics until it came to the point where they needed to.
So while we're
If
on
I could
that
ask
one,
just one additional question, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, I want to yield to whoever just
it's
spoke.
okay, go ahead.
My one additional question is, the cooperation of the town of Westford seems to be critical here to at least two of the remaining three options. What is the, and I'm putting this wrongly, and I apologize for that, but is there a problem with Westford having incentives to cooperate, or are there reasons not evident, except to close students of the issue, as to why Westford is fully on board and willing to cooperate dealing with the roadways within its jurisdiction that represent possible avenues of egress?
Do you want me to speak to that? So Senator Barrett, this is Virginia Timmons. I'm the current chair of the Select Board. We have.
We lost you, Virginia.
Thank you. Oh, he lost me?
Are we back?
Now we got you again.
Okay, thank you. We did reach out to the Westford, the town of Westford. We've reached out in a couple of different capacities. In the spring of 2022, when we asked them to look at some of the conditions around the permitting and give us some clarification, Westford is not inclined to push hard on this. It took them about 9 or 10 years to get through land court.
Yes.
In order to get to the permitting agreement that they have currently with Newport Materials. And they got a lot of, they went through a lot with their residents, people who were elected and appointed officials and employees went through a lot during that time period, and they are not inclined to start digging that all up again for what they see as truck traffic issues in Chelmsford. So that is one reason why we pose the question, and why our residents also pose the question about the possibly creating another interchange. And I understand what you've said this evening, the representatives from NIMCOG. My question is, I have a couple questions on that one. The 1 mile requirement, the two surrounding exits right now are 2 miles apart, at least, because they've remarked them with mile markers. And so they're 2 miles apart. So are we saying that that nucleus of the area is not halfway in between?
It is not halfway in between.
Okay.
It's
Closer to 40.
actually very close to
Route
the
40.
Route 40
Okay,
exit.
and then the other question, the other comments that were made in your report were that MassDOT viewed it as a solution that would benefit only private businesses. My understanding was there were some other previous, maybe more casual conversations in the past with representatives from MassDOT, and if that interchange is going to create opportunity for some type of economic area, I can't remember what the term is. enterprise zone, then that would take the discussion to a different level. Was there any discussion about whether that area could be viewed as a potential enterprise zone?
Not with the group that we met, no.
Okay.
No,
And can somebody help me understand, is MassDOT the final authority on this, or is there any other leverage that we have to speak at a federal level?
Well, MassDOT owns Route 3,
They own Route 3. Okay, so it's just federal funds that would fund it if it were to occur.
correct.
Okay. The other, going back to Senator Barrett's question just a little bit for history, if people don't have it, for options 2 and 3, which do require more coordination with Westford as well, the concerns that came up in the past about that, we had a public input session about dropping trucks to Route 40 or Groton Road in alternate ways. But when we had that public input session, the residents at Ledge Road and in the surrounding area on Groton Road and Main said, that's not going to solve our problem. That's potentially going to make it worse, because now you're sending all the quarry trucks down that way.
Virginia, we're missing a key, we missed that last sentence. That's not going to solve our problem because,
Yep. Can you hear me now?
yes.
Okay. It's going to, the concern was that it's going to exacerbate the issue, because now you've got 400 trips a day for the asphalt plant, and you're bringing hundreds of quarry trucks down through the same route. Okay, so you're going from what's now 400 trips a day or 200 trucks at the Groton Road asphalt plant entrance to several hundred more than that. And the second part of that is, even though we would like to think that the trucks are coming out of the asphalt plant and getting onto Route 3, they are not. Okay, they were taking a loophole, turning around at the Fletcher Quarry driveways on Groton Road and going back into Westford. And when Westford caught on to that, they've now blocked them from doing that. They don't all come onto Route 3. They go down the road, they stop for lunch, or more commonly, they're going down the road and turning around in Chelmsford to go back out through Westford for whatever reason. And we've also followed them out of Chelmsford going down into Lowell. So to say that we're just going to put the trucks onto Groton Road and hope they get on Route 3, I think people were really concerned about that, because that's not what they're doing today, and they have the opportunity to do that. So I just wanted that out there as background. And my other question is on Ward Way. Is Ward Way a public road or a private road, Paul?
The beginning of Ward Way is public.
At the beginning
And
at Groton?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then who?
Then it ends at private property.
At the Loisel property? So they own Ward Way?
They own the.
That part of it?
Yes, the
Okay.
area beyond the accepted public way is private, yes.
Okay.
And just to add, at the entrance at Commerce Way, they restrict all truck traffic from taking a right into Westford. And that's why they're taking a left out of there and doing a little U-turn
Right.
down the street, so they can
Because
actually
they
go
want
into
they
Westford.
want to go to Westford, and actually they can't do the little U-turn anymore because they blocked the driveways.
Mm-hmm.
So now they're coming through Chelmsford to go to Westford.
So how versed are you in the rules of DOT? So there's been some question about that exit, and the right-hand turn being excluded, whether that's legal or not.
There's a.
When they come out of the asphalt plant, there's a no right
out of
turn
the-
that we're just
oh,
discussing.
yes.
Whether that is technically illegal, is it
Well-
allowed that you can restrict someone only to go left, especially at a town line, which dumps all the trucks into one town, not the other?
Commerce Way is a private road. So they can do it. Yes, I know it's a state route, but Commerce Way is a private road.
So a private road can tell people leaving which way to go, and DOT.
Like coming out of a driveway, yes.
Groton Road is not a state road at that point, is it? It's
I
only
believe
a
at that point, it's owned by the town of Westford.
Right, it's only a state road
State-
near the interchange.
State-numbered route.
Right.
I'm sorry, go ahead, George.
Yeah, within 250 feet, I think.
But that was no different, like when the town permitted Walgreens going in, you couldn't take a left out of Walgreens. I think that's what Justin is saying, is a town can restrict it through its permitting process, the flow of traffic off of a private driveway, or a private way, yes.
Well, Senator Barrett asked why Westford wouldn't make some concessions. Westford was given about $8 million when the contract was originally signed, when the permit was granted. So I think they've gotten all they want, and so we did have a meeting, some of us in the room here, we did have a meeting trying to make that road go down through Wardway directly and keep the people from going off Dunstable and whatever. And Westwood put up kind of stopped it because one of the quarries was they were gonna swap with, at that time, it was, it's not, now UPS, but it was,
Rivard.
Rivard at that time. They were gonna swap off some land so that you could have a straight run, and that would have taken all the traffic away, and Westford said, no, if you do that, we're gonna,
Well, I don't think, yeah, to be clear, I don't think Westford said anything. I think the worry is that,
the attorney did, I guess.
I don't, well, so, the way I understand the whole situation is that, Westford, when they went through the process, their elected officials, there was a lot of turnover. Residents were very unhappy. People didn't keep their seats after the whole process was done. So from a political standpoint, there's not any incentive for them to open that can of worms up. The asphalt owner has the fear that if he's viewed in any way, shape, or form of trying to crack that permit, Westford will come in and shut him down, and until, if he fights and goes to court, he doesn't operate until he wins, which he said could take years. So there's no interest for the asphalt owner to try to break the permit. So you have the asphalt who's looking at this saying, I get the best deal I can get. You have the town saying, why would we even kick this can? And you have all the trucks in Chelmsford. So
I just want to remind folks, we do have the 400 trips per day on the asphalt plant, but what is completely untenuous and unlivable right now are the quarry trucks going out Ledge Road and then coming down into other parts of Chelmsford. So if we're going to spend our energy on something, I think it's what do we do with those quarry trucks?
Yeah, it's not the asphalt
Not how do
plant.
we change the terms of the asphalt plant
Yeah,
permit.
the 200 trucks, round trips, going in and out of the asphalt plant, that's a set number. I don't think there's an inflation increase on that or anything. That's the number.
And they are under that number right now.
Yeah, what's happened is on the backside, he bought a second piece of property under a different entity, and he has ramped up the gravel production through the roof.
Yep.
He's built a huge platform, and
And there's multiple quarries
yeah.
back there.
Are we down to 2 back there or 3?
Two very active.
It's on
Two
here.
active ones.
Well, you gave us a list of the owners.
It's in the report.
Yeah, it's on the last page. There might be 3, but 2 very active. So the question as they come back out of that Ledge Road is which quarry did they come from? Who's causing the amount of production? Which truck? But if you've driven the area up there, you definitely know who's doing more production than who.
Are there any other questions from the board or the legislators? Or Attorney Haverty?
Could I make one more point to the
Yep,
legislators?
absolutely, and then I was just going to open it up for public comment when we're done. Go ahead.
So if they weren't going to add anything, but the other problem that we have with the amount of gravel that's being produced up there is when we get into the dry season, July, August, and you're going up and down Route 3, because of the way they're crushing the stones, it almost looks like it's snowing on Route 3.
Yeah.
And you have a white powder that develops on the highway. And the residents who live across Route 3 have reported having to almost daily clean off their lawn furniture, sweep down their decks and their porches, have the windows cleaned, the side of the houses have, even the people on Ledge Road. I mean, their decks are just covered in this white dust.
And shut windows, right?
Yeah, and they can't open the windows, they can't go outside and play with their kids, they can't do any of this. And there was questions of what is in that dust, is it silica? What are the issues from all that? They've tried to spray the roads from the truck dust, but it's the plant. And it almost looks like on a clear, nice, blue, sunny day, you drive down there, and there's this cloud coming in through the trees, and it's a lot. It's a lot for the community.
Is the DOT, is it strictly Office 4, Regional 4 that's handling this?
In that area, it is District 4.
So they're the ones that have a lot of the say on.
They don't have the final say. It would probably go to the Secretary of Transportation, Gina Fiandaca, right now.
Thank you.
But that's getting, you're getting political when you get to that point.
The state does own 4 acres. I don't know if anybody's mentioned that, but the state does have 4 acres of land that's just sitting there on the south side of Route 3 between the aggregate plants and the, so I mean, if they were to make some kind of a ramp in there, I mean, they have.
And I believe they used that as a staging area when they were doing.
They did, when they, yes.
Doing expansion.
When they
of Route
enlarged
3.
it, right.
Yeah.
Any other comments from the board, or, go ahead, Rodney?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Board of Selectmen. My name's Rodney Elliott. I'm State Representative, just recently elected for the 16th Middlesex District. That includes North Chelmsford and Westlands, as well parts of Lowell. Thanks for inviting us here tonight. Let me also commend your DPW staff. The roads are in pretty good condition getting here, so I know it's early in the season, but on the NEMCOG study, I have met in the last week and a half or so with Jenny Raitt at NEMCOG to discuss this in advance of this, and it's good information to have and to have these options. I will tell you that I have also we had a filing deadline, a bill filing deadline this past Friday for the 193rd session. And in advance of that, I met with House Counsel specifically relative to this, and I filed a piece of legislation. Draft language will be forthcoming. I was waiting to get this report to sit down with House Counsel to see what exactly the options are for that road and the vehicle traffic, particularly commercial traffic. I guess my question before, I wanted just to make one more comment. What other commercial traffic is on that road, uses that road?
Ledge Road?
Ledge Road.
Commercial traffic?
Just delivery vehicles.
Okay,
That would be the
I
only.
thought I heard you say that there was
It's
other businesses.
It's a very local road, and then there are 3 businesses at the end of Ledge Road that cause that traffic.
Right, all relative to large truck
Yep.
traffic.
Yes.
Okay, I thought so. I just wanted to make sure. And I know, I feel badly for the neighbors. I spent a fair amount of time on multiple occasions to experience this. So when I ran, I said, I don't know what the solution is, but I am going to file a bill, and I have. And with this information, I plan on going back to House Counsel to see exactly what the language is, knowing what the options are. So I will report back now that I have this report on what House Counsel says and what the best process is to file legislation, and to see if, to get feedback from the board on how to proceed and whether to proceed. So I just wanted to share that as we move on. But I agree, whether it's emissions or from the processing plant or the exhaust from the vehicle traffic, it's constant. I know I'm telling members of the board everything you already know, but just from my experiences, it's just not acceptable for the people who live on that road to have to tolerate the volume, the noise. Just doesn't seem like that road is built for commercial vehicles. And again, I know I'm repeating everything that has been done, but I just want to let you know, and the people live on Ledge Road, Swain Road, Route 40, that we're working on it. And I don't have an answer exactly what the legislation is, but I will present it to you as soon as I meet with House Counsel. Okay.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board or legislators before I open it up for public input? Okay, if there's anyone who would like to speak during public input, just a reminder to give your name and address. And we have one person in this room, and then I'll go to the Zoom room.
Hi, good evening. Susan Olson, 140 Groton Road. I don't know how many times I've been here, or we've spoken about traffic studies and trucks and everything else. I think at this point, my opinion, we're traffic studied out. I think we've done enough that we know what the issue is and where the majority of all this traffic is coming from and the trucks are coming from. I have a question about the Department of Transportation. When they appeared here back in March of 2019, two of the representatives from the DOT made a comment that they questioned the legality of the town of Westford putting in place no left turn on a state road. And I don't know if I've got an answer from the Department of Transportation. And I've asked this question before, but I'm not sure whether that opinion ever came through. Another issue is our zoning bylaws. Our use regulations schedule residential indicates industrial commercial use is not permitted. I understand there was the belief use of Ledge Road was grandfathered. Is this a legal opinion? If so, has it been challenged? I understand in order for a zoning violation to be found, a determination must be made as far as what company is generating truck traffic on Ledge Road. I will personally volunteer to sit at the end of Ledge Road, and I will write down the names of every truck, of where they came from, what driveway they came out of, to gather this information, so we have that. Our roads do not have the width and pavement structure to continue to accommodate 20-plus wheel, 6 to 7 axle trucks. It is incredible, the size of these trucks, that over the last 4 or 5 months that drive by my house, go down Swain Road. These trucks are huge. My concern mostly is safety, that someone is going to get into an accident. One of these trucks is going to lose control, which I witnessed a near accident with the school bus 3 weeks ago, where the truck could not stop in time with the bus activated lights on. The only other thing I have is a Mass General Law, Chapter 85, Section 2, states that the State Department of Highway shall erect on state highways and on ways leading thereto and therefrom any and all signage and directions. No such signage and directions shall be erected by any authority without written approval by the state. The department may revoke any approval granted under this section. It goes back again to the signage out in front of Newport Materials that says no right turn. I don't know where information like that could come from, or if it's appealable, or perhaps town council could help, or I'm not sure. We are to a point now where our quality of life, our enjoyment of our property, of our children that can't play outside without being interrupted, health issues, noise, dust, vibration, spills. It is a detriment to our neighborhood, and we cannot enjoy the peaceful enjoyment of our most valuable asset, which is our property. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I just take the 3 points she made so we maybe know where to pull the string on these going forward? The middle one about zoning bylaws, I think that's something we can try to, I know we've looked at it in the past, but that's something we can vet internal to the town, correct?
Mhm, yes.
Okay. The DOT and the questioning the legality of no left turn on the state road, I think, Paul, you tried to address that before, but is there somewhere where we can sanity check that along with what Ms. Olson cited on the Mass General Law, Chapter 85, with the signage, without getting approval from the state?
Justin, I'll turn to you, I mean, because in terms
or-
of,
or
because he had
anybody
more
else.
expertise than I would have on this, but I know we've been unable to get anything in writing from MassDOT.
Is that anything that, in parallel with Justin, could our
I
House
couldn't.
reps help us with that, or?
You know, I'll check on the legality of the right turn. I'll talk with MassDOT and see if they're even.
And the signage,
see if
whether
they're
they can
even
put
aware-
the sign
Yes,
up.
of course. And signage.
I think what the problem.
I think Rodney was going to say something.
Sure, no, I'll circle back with House Counsel, who's drafting the legislation about this, so they can look up.
Thank you.
They can look up Chapter 85 at the same time. You and I can exchange some emails on that, Justin.
But again, even if you allow the right turn out of the asphalt plant, that's not going to mitigate the problems that are coming out of the quarry.
Right.
So we don't want to get
Right.
distracted
Yeah,
too
this-
far.
But I think.
This may bring a few less on the Groton Road.
Right, a few mess on the Groton Road, but it's not going
Right.
to address
I think the fact that it was part of the contract,
Well, Groton Road is an issue
Right, the
as well.
special permit, yeah.
the special permit, they've signed that they would only make I think, that's what, I think they
That's where
gave
it
it
came
up.
through
Yeah.
land court?
That's
Okay.
what I was told.
Okay.
Madam Chair, can I jump in here?
Yes, who is that? Oh.
Town Council, Paul Haverty. Yeah.
Yep, go ahead, Paul.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to point out that at the time this special permit was issued by the planning board in Westford, the town actually did take an appeal, and that appeal was then subsequently dismissed by the Superior Court. One of the issues that we did raise in that appeal was the issue of the right-hand turn condition. But it was something that just the town didn't have any standing to enforce.
Thank you.
Well,
Do we have any other public comments? Okay, I'm not,
Is there any type of strategy we can take as far as, I mean, the asphalt plants are the asphalt plants, and, you know, those 200 trucks that are making their round trips. But clearly, I think the bigger problem is all the trucks coming out of ledge.
right, that's what we're
Yeah,
trying
so,
to
so,
address.
I mean, let's just make sure as we're having the discussions, we're keeping the two topics straight, because I think it muddies the water when we talk about asphalt trucks and we talk about gravel trucks.
I agree.
And we talk about because they are two separate businesses owned by the same person, or entities, or however you want to look at it, but they are two separate corporate entities. And, you know, I think when you're going to argue whether it's bringing it up to Westford or whatever, that permit's on the asphalt plant, it's not on the gravel company. So I'd rather just focus on the gravel company and the volume of trucks created by the gravel companies than I would the asphalt plant. Because that, to me, seems like a really uphill battle.
And the asphalt plant is bound right now. It's already bounded by the court ruling.
Could I, Senator Barrett here, could I ask a question?
Absolutely.
And I apologize for doing this out of turn. Actually, I don't want to stand in the way of people watching remotely who are poised to ask their questions. But at some point, I would be interested to hear a discussion of options other than these four, because each of these four, nicely analyzed, seem to come with almost insurmountable obstacles unless I'm missing something. So the next issue would be whether there are different kinds of options. For example, and I'm just spitballing here, and please excuse me for not being more informed in my comments, but there is the question about gaining, negotiating leverage vis-a-vis either the town of Westford or the gravel company. And legitimate leverage, I mean, I'm not talking about anything illegitimate. I presume the town has really looked into very strict speed enforcement, for example, imposed on all the trucks that enter and leave.
Senator
Post-
Barrett, Senator Barrett, you dropped out. Could you start back on all?
By police standing in the appropriate places. I also assume that the town has looked into lowering the speed limit as low as it can go, imposed on all the trucks, either because it would then be made safer or because the gravel company would need to be forthcoming with a compromise if you were to slow its access and its egress from the site. I guess I'm interested, if only because we're threatened with exhausting these more straightforward options, the four that are before us. I'm wondering whether very tough enforcement or other new stratagems need to be considered here once we exhaust these four remedies, if indeed we do.
I'm going to let Manager Cohen speak to what we've done in terms of enforcement and speed. And I think the observation has been that while we may be slowing things down, we are not decreasing volume or any of the other particulates in the air and all the other issues. But go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I think as you noted, we've had the police department out there on numerous occasions doing speed enforcement, and miraculously, when the police are there, the speed is not recorded or observed as a problem. We've also had the state police units come out with dealing with the covered loads of the vehicles and so forth, and weights and so forth, and the safety of the vehicle. So, Senator Barrett, we've explored those options. They, as they said, they may.
Justin, you guys are picking up in the
Okay.
microphone.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
They have temporary speed bumps we've installed out there as well. There have been a number of approaches we've had to enhance safety, but none of them reduce the volume. And I think, in a summary, what's happened out there, and I think it was noted earlier, is if you look back in time versus 5 years ago or 10 years ago, whatever, the residential properties are there, the quarries are there in operation. What has changed is the volume of activity, it appears, out of one of the quarries. And I think that's really the crux of the issue is how can
And
we
what is
address
the
that?
explanation for that, Paul? What is the explanation
The
for
property-
the increase in volume?
There's a new owner, and they've ramped up the operations out of that quarry, to the best of our knowledge. Again, the other issues we've explored, Senator, are alternate means of access into the quarry, and that doesn't seem to be a viable answer either. So, you sort of have one way in and one way out that's attainable at this point. And I think that's sort of what is leading us, sort of fixating on these four options that you've been presented with this evening. And so we've done the traffic enforcement, we've done the state police for truck enforcement, we've done the temporary speed bumps, we've done everything within the limits of the ability under the state law that the town of Chelmsford can do. And, that's what sort of is, and it's been a long road, and I know a very frustrating road for many of the neighbors out there who, when they acquired their homes, that was not the status quo of when they came in. It's, as I said, this is a relatively new phenomenon that has caused all this angst and legitimate safety concerns out there. And we'll keep doing that. I mean, when the weather breaks in a couple of months, we'll be doing the same efforts and activities. We even built a school bus turnaround on by obtaining an easement off of a private home in the area, so that the children wouldn't have to walk down the roadway in unsafe conditions to get to the bus stop at the end of Ledge Road. So now we send a school bus that drives up the road, turns around in a private drive, at an easement that was acquired by town and funded by the town to construct that roadway. So we're exploring any and all options. It's just that we sought the assistance.
Can you describe to us, Paul, conversations you've had with the owner in an attempt to reach certain informal concessions? Have you sat down? Have you proposed informal arbitration? Not formal arbitration, but basically mediation, excuse me. Is the owner willing to talk to the town and simply hear the town people's human appeals?
I know the board members can speak to this as well. What I can say is the owner's been very agreeable and has sat down with the town on numerous occasions. The problem is the owner's not going to jeopardize their special permit to operate the asphalt plant, because it's clearly written in their special permit.
I think he's asking about the quarry.
No, but the
part.
quarry, no, because the issue of getting out of the quarry, if you wanted to go through these other means, would have to amend that permit. In terms of the quarry itself, no, there's been no, they've made, I think the best way to describe it, answering the quarry solely, without any external factors, they've made a significant investment in purchasing and enhancing the quarry operations, and they are not going to abandon those activities that are funding the acquisition and operating and profitability of the quarries. I think it's as simple as that.
I think that's correct.
Yeah,
They-
okay,
they-
Yeah, I think that's the best way to.
They're sorry for what our residents are going through, but they're not going to scale down their business operations.
Right.
If anything, they're going to scale them up.
Yes, go ahead, George.
No.
Senator Barrett, what I was going to say is, as you see from those alternatives, the only other way to abate the amount of traffic coming out Ledge Road is through the asphalt property, and that's where the challenge of altering the permit comes into play. The current owner has been agreeable to do things like, spray down the road to make sure it stays wet so there's no dust, but he's all about the volume. So he has not come up with any type of offer to decrease volume. As the town manager has suggested, the plant has probably quadrupled in size in 4 years, and he's maximizing his profits.
Right, and I'd like to, just for clarification purposes, this road is essentially a wide driveway. This road can accommodate a truck going in and a truck going out without having to go on to the neighbors, to the lawns of the people that live there, and going
We
back to
lost
the...
audio there.
He lost the audio.
Okay.
so-
Am I back? Or-
You're back.
Okay. So a truck going in, a truck going out can't pass each other without going up on the lawns of the residents of the neighborhood. There are no sidewalks there. They're up on their grass. And when, as Ken just mentioned, when they do spray down to do mitigation in the summertime to keep the dust down, it creates a mud pile on the people's lawns. The kids, even though we finally got a turnaround for the kids in order to get on the bus and not have to walk down and back there to school, where their parents used to have to go down and pick them up, but they still can't just walk down their street because of the fear of those trucks and the speed and the size of them coming down that road. So essentially, the people are locked in their homes and in their yards, essentially. So I just want to make sure you understand that a little speed change doesn't solve this problem.
How many people are we talking about, by the way?
You know what would be a good idea, Senator Barrett?
Let's
Probably
answer
20.
his question.
How many residents on
Is it
Ledge
20?
Way? Probably about that.
Yeah, probably
20-ish?
Yeah.
Is
Homes.
that about right?
20 homes.
Homes
20?
with
20
families.
20
Yeah,
families.
20 homes.
Yeah.
So probably
Are we talking about just one street or all 4 streets along the route that we're now discussing?
I'm just discussing Ledge Road right now.
one street.
But what happens, Senator,
And
is they
spills,
come out of
right.
Ledge Road and then it spills onto all those other roads that we've been talking about.
Yeah,
Right.
It's like an anthill.
but we're talking about 20 families on Ledge.
Correct.
Right. Approximately.
Be happy to meet you out here, Senator, someday if you'd like to go and look at the whole operation, and you may come up with some ideas,
Well, let's come up with the ideas first and then explore them.
I can do that.
But thank you. We'll certainly do that sometime.
So what are our next, let me just ask one more time, any other public input? Okay. Thoughts, go ahead.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to mention to Senator Barrett, when House Counsel does complete their work on this language, I'm happy to share it with you and Representative Simon
Sure.
and Representative Sierra as well.
Thank you, Representative.
So where do we go next? Representative Elliott is working legislation. We have a couple things we're going to look at on our end. Are there other options that NIMCOG can explore other than what's here, to Senator Barrett's point?
I mean, we
If
can
we
continue.
look at some of, if we look at some of the things, the manifestations of the traffic, the particulates and other things as well.
We can continue that discussion with MassDOT.
Okay.
Report back
Yeah.
anything more that we hear on it. But we'll definitely look into the Commerce Way, no right turn signage with MassDOT as well. hopefully get a stance from them, too.
And you mentioned Mass Dot. You also any jurisdiction or ability to reach out to EPA with air quality?
We can reach out to EPA.
I'm just curious, I've read what possibly could be in this. Granted, as they're busting it up, obviously it hasn't been tested, but I know if it's silica, it can be very dangerous.
I'm sure the air quality is quite bad along that road.
Even if they measured Route 3, which is where most of it lands, and then it just gets blown up and down the highway.
Madam Chair, if you don't mind, for the last time,
No.
Representative Simon and myself, we're going to reach out, and I had planned, and I had had this conversation with a number of members of the Board of Selectmen to reach
Jim
out.
Arciero's in the Zoom room, too.
I'm
Just so
sorry.
you know.
Uh,
Just so
and-
you know.
And Senator Barrett, and Representative Arcero.
Thanks for the shout out, Rod.
Forgive me. To reach out to DEP regarding air quality. Again, I can't tell you how many days I spent out there, and I concur with Selectman Carrata, and Selectman LaFave. The dust that compiles on a daily basis is unconscionable. So whether it's 10 homes, 20, just the residual and compounded impact of that operation on that neighborhood, something needs to be done, and I'm going to do everything that I can to work with the board and the neighbors to make sure that people do have a quality of life. But Representative, Cadaldo and myself were, as well as other members of the delegation, I think it makes sense to reach out to DEP and see at the best time to come out and do air quality testing. So we can work with NEMCOG to
Absolutely.
arrange that, okay?
Absolutely. I have a contact with DEP. I can reach out.
Thank you.
Anything else? So, NIMCOG and our representatives, you'll get back through Paul's office, get back to us on everything's, thank you.
And if anything changes on our end, we'll make sure we let all of you know and update you as we move forward too.
Sure, Justin and I can reach out to the town manager, and keep the entire delegation involved as to the legislation and meeting with DEP to talk about, air quality studies and, as well as the exhaust from those vehicles on that road. And
And if it makes sense for your council to communicate with our town council, I'm sure we'd be happy to do that too,
makes sense.
okay?
Thank
Anything
you.
else?
Have a safe ride home.
Thanks so much for
Thank you
coming
so
in.
much.
Thank you. Thanks.
I'm going to ask our legislators to hang on one for the next topic, if you don't mind. So next up, we just wanted to have a discussion while you were here on legislative priorities for the town of Chelmsford. Paul, do you want to take this?
Sure, I just want to sort of set the stage. I mean, obviously, we know it's a new legislative session, and there's a new administration, and that's just recently still sort of settling in, I guess the best way to describe it. And I think coming at the local level, the most notable thing is the state budget process for fiscal year '24. With the new governor the new governor's allowed till March 1st to file and their initial proposed operating budget, which is obviously much later than a traditional late January filing in a customary year, in which they'll have next year until a new governor is seated. And so what the board and I and the community is concerned with is sort of the assistance sort of looking forward. And we know in the case of the House, you'll pick up the budget in April, and the Senate will pick it up in May, and we'd hope to have it effect by July 1st, but, it's going to get in effect probably by the end of July, as if looking at recent years as a constraint. And so there's just a number of concerns that the town has in terms of budgetary process. We'll start with that going forward. In terms of Chapter 70 funding, and the Chapter 70 formula and calculations, Chapter 90 funding, how this new 4% income tax surcharge will be allocated, and I know you're hearing from a lot of different educational and transportation and other constituencies in terms of the allowed use of those monies, unrestricted general government aid. So I think the first concern is, in the whole budget cycle, in terms of, how we can have input, because we know what's occurred in the last couple of years with either the legislative cycle with earmarks and/or the ARPA funding with earmarks, that, that's a very vibrant and moving process, and we want to know how we can prepare and then how we can have input as the community. I think, quite frankly, the most notable disappointing thing that arrived in the last few days is the new governor announced a filing of a 2-year Chapter 90 transportation funding filing cycle, which has occurred in the past and has never taken place because the legislature has chosen to do it annually. But I think the most disappointing part about her announcement was that she funded for only $200 million per year in her proposal, which has been the same funding level that has been in effect for over a decade. And given the impacts of inflation, not to mention what's needed to maintain roads and bridges in municipalities, that sort of was a bit underwhelming. And I understand, given that they don't have a full handle on their budget process and don't have everybody in place, but I think that's sort of the place to start is the challenges of funding moving forward. So I think I'll just stop right there at this point.
If I could start, I just first Happy New Year to everybody. As you can see, we have a new squad here. We have a new delegation. There's a lot of excitement. Certainly, myself and Senator Barrett are sharing some old war stories and some legislative accomplishments we've had and challenges that we've had over the years. And certainly, this is going to be an exciting session. But if I could just sort of take, just for the edification of folks watching at home and people that are in there, just a little bit about how the process works, so I could just lay that out. Paul touched on it very eloquently, but certainly, with a new governor, typically the budget, the House 1 budget from the administration would be January 25th. Certainly that's not looking like that's going to be happening as of right now, but she does have various weeks to do so. What we would see then is the budget document that Governor Healy would put forward. Certainly would then the Ways and Means, House and Senate Joint Committees on Ways and Means, which deal with all the money aspects of the state. We go through across the state and listen to people, in all corners of the Commonwealth to get input on the House Ways and Means budget, which comes out usually about mid-April. And then there's amendments and debate for, I would say typically 5 to 6 to 7 days, usually passed within a week. And the Senate budget typically in May, very similar process. And then our conference committee with the House and Senate is really when both versions are sort of ironed out. And we come up with one single compromise budget. It's an up and down vote, and we usually do it by July 1st. The governor then would review and approve with recommendations and vetoes, and we have throughout that legislative year to deal with those vetoes. So to Paul's point, direction-wise, where should this delegation start to have conversations about needs in Chelmsford? And I certainly think that should happen now. I always believe in long-term planning when it comes to either regional funding issues or language issues or something that's smaller on the smaller scale. This last session we had, certainly a unique opportunity with ARPA money. I know we have Representative Maria here, Congresswoman Trahan's office represented tonight. Who's been instrumental in directing a lot of money towards this region. So it's been
Jim, you just cut out.
development bill that was passed months afterward.
Jim, you
So
cut out.
from there,
Jim,
I would say that
excuse me,
that's a
Jim.
problem.
You cut out at "so it's Ben." Could you start back at that?
Okay, I'll have to figure out what I said. No, so it's been certainly a different process in years past legislatively with.
We lost you again.
Of course, you can't hear that you've lost them.
Especially in this last two sessions.
It's all right.
Chapter 70 is certainly a challenge. And I know from representing this district for a number of years that certainly Chelmsford has not recovered in so many ways, from money towards Chapter 70. What I am optimistic about certainly was the Promise Act, which put $150 million into the formula, especially taking into consideration special education and healthcare costs. But on top of that, now we're looking at money from the Promise Act and the Fair Share Amendment, excuse me. And so the estimates from that ballot initiative are to bring in about 1.3 to, on the high level, $2 billion towards transportation and education. So that sort of lays out how the process starts, and I certainly don't want to commandeer all the time here. On legislators here probably have a few things to add, but I'll just leave it there. And also to Paul's point as well, there'll be a process when it comes to the Chapter 90s money. I know that an additional monies were added to the $200 million that we did in the last major Chapter 90 bill, which I believe ended up being $350 million. I hope you folks heard that last part.
Yeah, we did. We
Okay.
did. The challenge for all of you is, and again, forgive me for being simplistic. As you probably know, when schools are doing their scheduling and their hiring for the fall, coming back to school in August, they're doing that in April, May time periods, okay? When these matters don't get resolved to the end of July, it's really hard to put those funding into education into use because, you've got your class sizes, your hiring and everything into effect. And I know it's a difficult process to go through, but years ago, they used to do an early local aid resolution in March, where they would say to communities, hey, look, we know we're not through the funding process, but this is what you can expect to anticipate going forward. And the problem is when that's not occurring now, it really hamstrings the vocational schools or the general public schools in terms of how they can bring those monies into use into the school year, because they've sort of already have put their programs and hirings and processes into place. And I think that, and I guess the message I'd have was the sooner the better in terms of trying to provide some guidance to cities and towns, because you just can't juggle those things in August, given the size of school districts like Westford and Chelmsford, never meeting how Lowell could do it at that point in time, because the logistics of trying to pivot at that time are really challenging.
I think also just one, to add on to that is the challenges of the pandemic. Certainly over the last, 3 years as we move post-pandemic there, I definitely think timing had something to do with some of those things as well. But I agree, Paul, it's been a challenge. Sometimes they say the legislature is like herding cats, and it does become difficult. I know a number of legislators in this room have signed on to local aid resolutions, or we've actually had legislation that I've worked with Representative Kane out of Shrewsbury on in the past to have a local aid resolution. So we hear you there. But also in Chelmsford too, this last session, I actually think that, the earlier the better that we talk about projects, whether they're regional, whether there's more collaboration in cities and towns around us, or they're specific just to like a smaller earmark in Chelmsford when you look at the whole sort of pie of $52 billion. The economic development bill last session was very frustrating as we saw things being held up months after we anticipated the passage of them. But the wait was good for smaller projects, I think, in but are bigger to families and neighborhoods, such as the Chelmsford Varney Playground, which the delegation was able to get 150,000 for the Chelmsford water wastewater flow system, and the PFAS remediation funding, which we ended up approximately 350,000 for. These are projects that affect neighborhoods, affect the safety and health and safety of families. And we want to work with you on that. And I think the earlier the better. That's my message.
The only one I would mention, just to give you a specific thing, and I know you're hearing this from all across the Commonwealth, and I'm not saying it's not a legitimate change, but it's crushing, is the state is given preliminary approval for a 14% increase in special education tuitions. And again, I'm not saying it's not warranted, but I don't know how cities and towns are going to be able to, confront that along with their other challenges. And I know it hasn't been finalized yet, but that is, and I'm sure you're hearing it from New Bedford to North Adams, that's a major concern and one we're keeping an eye on because, that has a tremendous impact. And again, not saying it's not warranted and shouldn't be provided, but if it's the same, well, here's your minimum aid as a non-entitlement community, Chelmsford, here's your $30 per student, which comes out to about $150,000 per fiscal year, when that impact of that tuition increase alone is $750,000. That's the kind of stuff that just has communities reeling. And again, I don't mean to repeat what you're probably hearing from others
Other cities and towns.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not saying it's not a legitimate request, but the problem is if you've got, the bigger problem is if you've got inflation running at 6, 8, 7, 5, whatever percent, and Proposition 2.5 limits the growth in the property tax levy to 2.5% and isn't allowed to modify by the inflation rate. It worked great when inflation was 2%, but right now it's really devastating in terms of trying to hang on. I guess the best way to describe it. And so I think.
Well, I would also say that revenues have been strong. The consensus revenue. They'll be coming up with a consensus revenue number very shortly.
By the end of the month, yeah.
And the House and the Senate budget writers meet with economists in a public setting at the State House, along with Administration and Finance, which would be Governor Healy's team, as well as others, to come up with a target number. I do, Paul, sort of to your point as well, certainly that's something that's bringing town managers and select board and local officials a little anxiety on the numbers. But I will say that there's going to be a robust discussion, if you will, on revenues in the upcoming months. First, we're going to get more clarity on Promise Act money as that moves forward. We're going to get more clarity on the millionaire's tax, if you will, and how much that will accrue in the period of time and where that will be spent. That'll be a conversation between House and Senate, and of course in deliberations within the body to find out where those monies are going to go. And certainly the budget process as a whole. So there's definitely more, I would say, moving parts on revenues that aren't all terrible. They're certainly there is money available. Our rainy day fund is almost $7 billion, or is at $7 billion right now. But there is that fear of recession moving forward. And I just see those conversations starting to increase momentum over the next 4 to 5 to 6 weeks.
Paul, I just want to be mindful.
Paul, one thing I think that, let me just supplement that Jim's excellent summary. One thing we can bring back to the legislature is your point about the possibility of reinstating early local aid resolutions. I think with a new governor, there's an opening there to see if we can reinstitute that practice, which would give Chelmsford some sort of sense, even in advance of a final state budget. So I thank you for that, and I will bring that back to the Senate, I promise you.
I just want to be mindful. We've had them here for long. Is there anything more that you want to clarify that's on this list?
If we could, just for the closing, I know you've been so generous with your time this evening.
another time, another period later, but the water infrastructure bill on the federal level, I think that's going to help with SRF and certainly the Clean Water Trust for the town of Chelmsford. I know that that's been on your sort of agenda, and we've had a number of conversations with Congresswoman Trahan's office on that topic. And so I just wanted to bring you your attention that the Commonwealth will be receiving more money.
Yeah, let me tie into that, Representative. There's clearly a need and clearly enthusiasm and an effort from the governor down to the legislature, everyone, for creating additional housing. You know, the housing prices are ridiculous. We know that. And you know, we even see the mayor of Boston now looking for rent control and other extraordinary efforts. But the challenge with building housing isn't often just a simple, no, we don't want it. The challenge with creating additional housing is communities, and I'll just state in Chelmsford's case, you need to have the infrastructure to support the additional housing. And in our case, the biggest one is sewer infrastructure. And I know that we're not alone, but if you're going to build significant amounts of additional housing units which are needed to house people in the communities, you can't do that if you can't flush the toilets, and you can't otherwise remove the wastewater from the properties. And that's a constraint, I know, for Chelmsford, and I know it's for other communities. In addition to that, never mentioned the school infrastructure issues. We are at the point now, we have modular buildings at our schools because we're at capacity. And as we know, the MSBA is constrained because of the high cost of constructing schools, that they're not even doing the traditional roof and window repair programs and limiting the roofing programs as well. And so the challenge becomes communities are all for housing and meeting the additional need for housing and economic development. But if you don't have the essentials of water and sewer and transportation infrastructure, I don't know how you can accommodate those needs, no matter how good the intent is.
Well, it's an interesting segue into a housing issue going on in Littleton, which I represent too, and one of Chelmsford's native sons, Sal Lapoli, was a former member of the school committee in Chelmsford here. He put forward a plan which he purchased the IBM campus in Littleton, which when IBM during the pandemic left to Cambridge and I believe North Carolina, we were left with 500,000 square feet, parcel in Littleton. And Sal was able to get through 780 new units through town meeting, but the biggest issue has been the sewer issue. So to your point, Paul, in last session, we were able, through a Mass Works grant, to get $8 million for the town of Littleton to do that sewer hookup. But what I will say is the Lieutenant Governor, Kim Driscoll, who I'm sure you know from MMA as well as members of this board, she really is a housing champion in so many ways for the city of Salem, and really understands the sort of details that come with development and what communities are sort of facing and the challenges that they have. So I think to have a conversation with the administration about this particular topic moving forward would be beneficial to the town of Chelmsford, and I think the delegation would love to sort of entertain that conversation.
And I know I want to represent Maria, who's here from the Congresswoman's office. She's made tremendous strides in terms of funding and attention to the combined sewer overflows, which is the raw sewage dumping into the river during severe rain events. And I know Representative Elliott's very familiar with that, having his service in Lowell. The challenge with that is, well, how can you entertain expansion of wastewater treatment plants when you haven't solved the problem of your existing plants? Throwing raw sewage into the waterways. And again, it's not just Lowell. We know it's happening up and down the river in other cases, and that's the real challenge. So in our case, we don't have treatment capacity. All of our wastewater goes to Lowell, as does Tewksbury's, as does Drake's for the most part, and the cities itself, and some of Tingsborough's as well. It's a real constraint, and I think the concern is that we tend to get brandished of, well, a community's not doing its fair share in terms of housing supply. Well, how could we if we don't have the means of having the capacity to address the additional housing that's necessary.
Paul, there's one issue here on the list that you haven't discussed much, and I don't think anyone has, regarding the loss of auxiliary police. Can you just expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, and I can tell you, I've heard from my colleagues, on some of the coastal communities and so forth, the Police Reform Act has basically been the death knell of auxiliary police. In terms of their ability to, they have to meet all of the permitting requirements and licensing and other requirements, and it just doesn't work. And in essence, what you'd have to do is one of two things: disarm them, or make them take the training and the process that no one has seemed to do. So I hear from communities, even a place like Foxborough, which runs this, Gillette Stadium and so forth, or Mansfield, where they're running another entertainment venue, they can't get their security shifts filled because, as a result of police reform, the auxiliary police have just disappeared. And it's not because they're afraid of the liability, it's because they just can't get the certification requirements, which I think was an unintended consequence of the police reform in Massachusetts.
I think the intent initially was that if they're going to have arrest power and carry a weapon, that they were going to go to the academy. I think that's technically
exactly.
I think what police reform was looking to do, and but I appreciate you bringing this to my attention. I've heard from one individual about this since police reform, but certainly if cities and towns or chiefs find this to be an issue, we would like to certainly take that back and see what we could do to help.
Yeah, our board has heard it from our chief that it's essentially just led to the extinction of the auxiliary police, and again, I know it's not just a Chelmsford phenomenon. They just can't. There's just the inability to get those shifts filled, and it affects us in the case of a parade or an emergency situation in the community that we just don't have the auxiliary response. And again, it can go to bigger venues as well.
Paul, it's a good example of the benefit of the communication. I had not heard of this challenge yet, and I know Rep. Arciero has, and maybe my colleagues have, but it's very helpful. Even this list, even though we've all heard about all of these challenges before, having this list is very helpful in crafting conversations. I think similarly, to the extent that there are capital projects that you can put dollar amounts next to the extent that you want to formally make earmark requests of us, that will be helpful for us throughout the budgeting process. And as Rep. Arciero has mentioned, that process is fluid. There are different pots of money that we're going to be dealing with. And so truly the earlier, the better. In regard to the concern, about the timing of local aid, I'm not sure how much can happen in the next year about that timing, but I think is the way that I see it is working to reset the baseline and improve the baseline, move it up specifically with respect to Chapter 70 education funding or other types of school funding, so that there is more certainty, and it's the good type of certainty moving forward. And I know that everybody's going to be rolling in the same direction on that. Representative Elliott and I are marking our 20th day in the state legislature today, and I know both of us feel, certainly I do, it's an honor, and I really appreciate you reaching out to us proactively. Of the 4 towns I represent, this is the first select board meeting that I'm appearing at as a representative, and I really hope that you'll continue to reach out to us proactively. It's helpful to have things in writing. It's helpful to come to the meetings and hear from you, and I hope that you'll keep inviting us back, especially as we move forward throughout the spring and the summer with the budget processes.
Thank you. Paul, was there anything else in this mental health programs or anything else we didn't touch on?
No, I think we've kept them an hour and a half.
I'd like to just interject here if I could.
Absolutely, go ahead.
Right, I wanted to first thank the select board and the town manager for inviting our office to this Board of Select meeting. I think it's important to keep the communication often and clear. Very lucky to have the state delegation on here, strong workers. I am a product of the state government, so I really know the work that they all do to move communities like Chelmsford forward. I have taken a drive on Ledge Road and completely know the frustration of the neighbors. And I think if we continue to work to find outside solutions or outside of the box, solutions to this, we can keep the conversation going. I know the Congresswoman has had conversations with myself. She has a concern to that neighborhood. But I think if we continue to have discussions, I know I'm in constant communication with the town manager, and anything that comes up, please feel free to reach out. Sewer and water is a daily conversation I'm having, not just with Chelmsford, but throughout the Congresswoman's district. She, just like Rep. Arciero had pointed out, Congresswoman worked on securing money for SRF and PFAS removal. And together, I think we can find some really good solutions to not just for Chelmsford, but for all of the surrounding communities that regionally are affected by these issues. So thank you again. Thank you to NIMCOG for the presentation. I'll be reaching out as well to maybe trial run a few ideas I might have, but I think the next steps that they mentioned on environmental may be something to look at. So thank you.
If I could just add for the benefit of the public, I think the select board probably knows, but Representative Arciero, Representative Elliott, and Senator Barrett and I, we talk pretty much daily. I can hit Representative Elliott with a piece of popcorn from where I sit in the office.
And he has.
And so we are working together. When the select board or the town manager reaches out to us about any particular issue, we're talking amongst ourselves about it, and there is communication there. So you can trust that is continuing to happen. Likewise, Congresswoman Trahan has a well-earned reputation for being really engaged, and her staff being really engaged with the state legislators. So I've already been working with that office. I'm sure my colleagues have. They are very proactive in reaching out to us. So I just want people to understand that although the three people in the House represent different parts of the town, we are talking to each other, we're working together, and it will continue to be the case.
A couple of you have said this type of conversation together is valuable. Is there like a frequency you would recommend if we wanted to continue the dialogue?
Quarterly?
Quarterly?
Senator?
I think for a state senator, quarterly would be tough since I have 8 communities. So I wouldn't second that suggestion, but I think one time in the spring and one time in the fall would definitely make sense and enable us to keep things going.
Okay.
And depending on issue, if we have an issue where you guys need us to come in, we're going to come in. I mean,
Right.
It's as simple as that. So.
Well, we can bring our House reps in quarterly.
Yeah, you can bring us in.
Yeah.
There's enough of us.
Especially on days when it's very perilous to travel here.
Yeah, the rookies had to drive in.
Anything else?
I just want to, I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I agree. I'll just close with, the legislature, we have been very busy, and I think it's important. Maybe just, we've all been on caucus meetings talking about legislation. It has been very busy, and I think it's a good thing because many of the things that relate to communities and cities and towns, the legislature is working on. And I do like the idea of having served for 24 years on the local level, the local aid resolution, because that decision complicates the budget discussions on the local level, in particular during town meetings. So I like Senator Barrett's idea of bringing that forward, and I'm sure the dean of our delegation here, Rep. Arciero, will do the same. But I think that goes a long way. I do share a little bit of disappointment relative to Chapter 90 money. If we have all heard more than once that our roads and our bridges are in need of desperate repair. I hope there'll be a supplemental, as Representative Arcero has referenced, and Senator Barrett, that whether it's the remaining 1.75 billion of ARPA money that the state has at its disposal. I think that discussion goes for lots of things, whether it's MSBA funding for those communities that got caught in the middle of COVID issues, but we hear loud and clear from members of the Board of Selectmen. I speak regularly and look forward to speaking regularly to all members of the Board of Selectmen. I hear from Selectman Dixon every other day. So keep calling, because this is how we get the pulse of what is going on. So I just wanted to touch on mental health programs.
Sure, yeah.
I can tell you, I sat on a Zoom meeting with the Mass Association of Health Providers on it was a forum on children behavioral health. It's a huge issue. There are significant initiatives coming forward. There are lots of partners working on this. I can tell in the city of Lowell they've already started with crisis centers, but you will see in the future programs, initiatives, and we will be sure to share initiatives being rolled out and funding associated with those throughout the budget process, because I do think it's significant across the Commonwealth. I did meet with the Chelmsford Water Department, heard all about PFAS and the good work that our Rep. Arciero did in getting that money to clean up that site at one of the aquifers. And so I have actually filed a bill, again, working with House Counsel. It was important to get a placeholder in before this Friday, and House Counsel, the attorneys for the House of Representatives are working on language on exactly what the legislature can do, because it's in excess of 30 municipal water districts that are plagued with this PFAS program, PFAS limits, and if it drops to the number 5, that is significantly detrimental, that you all know, with the water system. So I did file that legislation as well, and as Rep. Arcero mentioned, the Revenue Consensus Committee meets tomorrow on where we are financially, so that kicks off where the funding levels and how that's going to impact the state budget. So thanks for having us here. It's a good opportunity for us to share what we're doing, and clearly to hear more about what the town issues are. We've heard about them during the last cycle, and we're gonna work working on them.
Yeah, thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
And on behalf of the board, I want to thank you all again for coming. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye now.
Okay, Paul, next up we have the reports and presentations.
Yeah, and this is sort of DPW Director Christine Clancy's portion of the meeting tonight. She's here on 2 very important issues. One is to talk about a sewer pump station and force main assessment capital plan. And the second will be on the current status of our opera project. So I'll turn it over to Christine, who I think has really clearly provided a synopsis in her memo, as well as her spreadsheets of the investment that's necessary to stay on top of our sewer infrastructure.
Good evening. So the first memo we have tonight is talking on the capital improvement plan for both the pump stations, as Paul said, and our force main assessment. In the town of Chelmsford, we have 41 pump stations across town, quite a significant amount. In 2016, Weston and Sampson conducted a study, an assessment of all 41 pump stations, making recommendations, some minor and some more larger capital projects. Of that report, really, there are 14 remaining pump stations to be completed that are really called capital and projects. And those capital projects fall into 2 categories, one being a major capital project, and on this spreadsheet they are shown in blue, and then minor capital improvement projects. As far as the dollar value, we're looking at approximately $900,000 of current estimated amount for the major projects, and that really is a full upgrade, including piping and the addition of submersible pumps, electrical controls, and the addition of a building. All of our pump stations we want to put into a building to house the controls and many of the equipment. And the minor pump station upgrades, those are more, that is in the range of, I think, about $200,000 per an upgrade, a little plus, a little under, depending on the station. That is not an entire upgrade. It does look at the pumps to see if there's any efficiencies or any upgrades we need to do, but it's really building that building enclosure and getting those controls inside a building. This report, as I said, was conducted in 2016, so the costs that were proposed back in 2016 have significantly increased to what costs are today. As you can see in one of the columns, it says 2016 assessment. The costs were about $450,000 for these major upgrades. Now we're estimating about $900,000. So this plan, it says over 10 years, it really takes us through fiscal year 32, outlines the annual cost for each of these upgrades. At the end of this, we should really be done with all of our pump stations. There will be annual adjustments, annual work that needs to be done to these pump stations, but that will be managed within our annual operating budget under the sewer division. The next projects that we have are the Mylan pump station that's been fully designed. That would be the next project in that amount right there. We have it partially funded, but with the significant cost increase, that's the funding that we're seeking for FY24. And then the project after that would be the Kensington Road pump station. That is a pump station that was funded partially under ARPA, $265,000. That value has substantially been increased in terms of the estimated construction costs. I'm not proposing that overrun in ARPA. I'm proposing that delta would be under the CIP budget, just because it's such a significant delta. Before I move on to the next portion of the memo, are there any questions on this spreadsheet?
So the question I had is the funding sources for
Yeah.
Is it the sewer fund plus capital, or what is it?
No, this basically anything that's funded for sewer is in the case of these projects of capital projects are borrowed, and they're funded through the sewer enterprise. So they're basically funded through your sewer rates and so forth. So what happens is you'll have a budget at town meeting for the sewer enterprise operation, and then projects such as Myland Avenue this year would be a separate warrant article right after the sewer budget, so a sewer enterprise budget that can be funded, and then those are borrowed, and then what's happening is you're paying off some debt, and then you're incurring new debt as you move in over time. And so the idea is, and I think the beauty of this plan is it's relatively stable over the decade that, in terms of the amount of funding that's required in a particular period, and that, and I think that's how it will roll out in effect. So aside from that, you really don't. Well, we get into the budget thing next week, but bottom line is that's how it's funded. Basically, is it's separately approved projects for capital, but they're funded through the sewer enterprise operation, i.e., polite way of saying it's funded through your sewer bills.
Okay.
We do show an annual inflation amount of about 5% beyond of FY24, just to note as well. The next chart is so in 2019, there was a forced main break on a 24-inch forced main over at Southwell. I think everyone knows. And that resulted in an SSO to the Merrimack River, which is a sanitary sewer overflow that was discharging directly to the Merrimack River. That was an required emergency repair in the amount of about $700,000. As an onset, based on that event, DEP, that's where they had asked us to update both the pump station assessment memo that was prepared in 2016 and also look at having a force main assessment completed over a period of time. So this is what, as a result of, in the recent report that Weston and Sampson had done, they had put together this plan over the next essentially 10 years, evaluating the force mains. We have about 12 miles of force mains in town, ranging in size between 4 inches and 24 inches in diameter. So this proposal would provide annual assessment. These costs reflected here do not include repairs. We do have a fairly new system, so we're hopeful that we're not finding significant repairs needed. Repairs would be something that we have to look at separately. The deterioration, the reason for the incident at the Southwell was a joint. It was a deteriorated joint on the 24-inch main. So this is proposed over the next 10 years. This annual cost, I think, is also relatively stable. It does start to drop off at the end. And this is something that we would be proposing just over the next 10 years. We did talk internally that do we have to assess every single main in all 12 miles? We're showing this as assessing all 12 miles. If we continue on this program, like we're starting it this year, and we find that everything's really in pristine condition and the Southwell incident was more of an isolated, we can maybe look at adjusting this in future years, but this would show us looking at everything over the next essentially 10 years. I think, are there any other questions? And this also, we show a 5% annual inflation, just given the estimated value for annual or adjustment for inflation. The inspection would be completed via a camera inspection. That would, and it is relatively expensive because the mains stay intact they're live while we do these inspections. And the inspection would, not just a camera inspection, but it would also measure the thickness of the pipe. And I think that's something we really want to know, because obviously if it's thinner, then it would likely deteriorate sooner. That's it. I don't know if there's any questions on this.
I don't see any here or in the Zoom room.
All right. So then the next update is the monthly ARPA update. And I'll just, before we jump into the spreadsheet, I can give an overview of this. So this is an update provided monthly to you, and it does outline all the projects that we have currently funded under ARPA. We give a status update, procurement timeline, also an update on the spending, any projected overruns or underruns. And we did add this month, the total forecasted project cost. I think that was something we talked about last month, so we do have an added column this month. We also, in this month's update, I do have project status by color. Each column or each row does have a very detailed update, but when we get into it, we did add some color coding. In total, we have $7.5 million in allocated ARPA funds. Of the $7.5 million that we could allocate, 4.3 million are allocated. 55% of the total allocated amount has been procured to date. We also did look at what has been invoiced from what of the procured amount has been invoiced, and that is 60%. We are currently tracking about $700,000 in potential overrun of the current projects, and there is $2.58 million remaining to be allocated. I don't know if we want to jump to the spreadsheet. I can explain the colors. So here is different from previous months. The colors are a little busy, but I do think they are helpful. So the green shows that projects that are procured, but works ongoing. The colors that are yellow are projects that we're just starting to, they're partially procured, so it's not fully procured. Projects in red are projects that are not procured. It doesn't mean we're not working on them. These are usually more complex projects where we're scoping out the remaining work, or we're working on some element to get us to procurement. The projects that are listed in blue are complete, procured and complete, and that's where we really then can show the forecasted column. So the forecasted column is over on the right. That shows the total project anticipated cost. But for projects that are highlighted in blue, that's really the total total amount spent on that project. I would like to highlight some updates from the last month, and I can go over any questions in particular on, this is a lengthy spreadsheet, but there were some updates, is that there were numbers 5, 8, and 9, they were HVAC projects. Last month we weren't sure if we were completed with the projects, we were still looking to see if there was additional scope. We have looped back around to those sites and have concluded that those projects are complete. So as you can see in the estimated escalation price adjustment column, we have made that adjustment so we can we can close out those projects, and so that is some money put back into the ARPA overall amount. Also on number 1 and 1B, in last month we had said that what we currently have as a procured amount or committed amount for item number 1 is $506,000. That is a contracted amount that we have for on-call HVAC assistance in our schools. Looking at what we've actually utilized them for, they have had some difficulties providing contractors as frequently as we needed. We actually are estimating a significant underrun in that item. So you can see that under the underrun, we see potentially not utilizing all $506,000 and actually will be only estimated $191,000 spent. So that's a significant underrun. And then under 1B, I had added that just because we had talked about potentially continuing that the contract under item 1 does expire this June. So looking at continuing that same program through the end of 2026, in looking at what we've have been spending and also looking at some contingency, I'm estimating that total project would be $569,000. So that's the biggest delta, I think, change in terms of this column. You see that the overrun under 1 is, or the underrun is of $315,000, but we have an overrun of $430,000. And then there were also some updates under the Kensington pump station. I talked about that earlier tonight. That's number 32 on the spreadsheet. We are projecting an overrun. Costs have significantly increased from I think when we originally prepared projected costs for ARPA, but I am not showing that as an overrun on this spreadsheet. We're proposing to include that in the capital infrastructure improvement plan. And then just 2 minor updates is I know that the fire department just did some cancer screening. There was a slight overrun in that by about $800. And the police are about to do some screening, and they are anticipating an overrun, small amount, I think a few $1,000s. As far as other programmatic updates, and especially for the DPW projects, we are really busy right now with procurement. A lot of these projects, especially some that are highlighted in yellow or red, we say bidding in February. So we're right now very busy working on design or procurement of construction. So we hope to really see some more significant updates in the next couple months. I don't know if there are any questions.
Not seeing any.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
This
This
helps,
is
some of the
okay.
updates you
Right.
did to this.
Good. Yeah, I think the
formatting
colors
is really helpful.
I think the colors do help because it draws you to those areas. So we'll continue in this format and come back with some more updates next month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Paul, we got Patrol Officers Union.
Yeah, members of the board, I'm pleased to present for your formal vote in approval a memorandum of agreement that's been reached between the town of Chelmsford and the Chelmsford Police Patrol Officers Association. It's a 3-year collective bargaining agreement that covers fiscal years 22, 23, 24. So basically, it becomes effective going back 6 months of the current fiscal year and the next 2 fiscal years. So it becomes effective July 1 of 2022. basically, the highlights of the agreement are noted on, well, all the contents of the agreement are there, but the highlights are, we've reached agreement on, I guess, some substantive matters, most notably to point out that a patrol officer would be required to have 3 full years of full-time experience as a Chelmsford patrol officer before being eligible to be promoted to the rank of sergeant in the community. We have a 3-year wage schedule that brings us in line with our comparable communities. It's a 2.5% per year increase in the wage schedule, and in addition to that, at the beginning of the first year, there's a $1 per hour wage increase. And a couple other minor things for call-in pay, that went from 3 hours of pay to the standard in the industry of 4 hours of pay. We added the Juneteenth holiday, and then the language around the emergency medical technician incentive, as the current contract has language that requires that 50% of the patrol officers' force has to be certified in order to receive that 6% stipend. And what we've done is, because of the variability, and like if an officer were to become promoted or transfer to the state police or something else, when you're at that threshold, it causes angst. And we are been around that threshold. So the way to transition it to an acceptable resolution is basically newly hired officers would be required to obtain and maintain their EMT standards. So that in the long run actually benefits, because now you're going way beyond 50% is all the people that you're bringing in. So that's a good, I think, a mutually agreeable and acceptable resolution. So that is the essence of the agreement. What would happen is the union has met and ratified by membership this agreement. Upon your approval, the final step would be to bring it to town meeting at our next town meeting, which at this point appears to be the spring annual town meeting in April, and then have it approved. So what would happen there is we would fund the retro amount going backwards, and then we'd then fund obviously the amount going forward into the remaining 2 fiscal years of the agreement.
Any further questions or discussion? Pat, do you have anything?
No, I'm all set, thanks.
Okay. Now I'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion that the Select Board approve the memorandum of agreement by and between the Town of Chelmsford and the Chelmsford Police Patrolmen's Association Fraternal Order of Police, Lodge 110, as proposed.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Pat?
Aye. Aye.
5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, town manager reports.
Yes, real briefly this evening, I provided you with the first draft list of spring annual town meeting warrant articles. Right now, there's 29. How it's going to work from here is you have 3 meetings prior to your scheduled signing of the warrant on February 27th. So I'll bring your revised list and probably the draft content of the warrant at your meeting a week from tonight, then a further revised draft at February 13th, and then come in with the document you would sign on the 27th, and that obviously, is a traditional schedule that allows things to proceed as we move forward. I guess the good news is it's not a very complicated warrant in terms of the length, particularly from other years. The first, almost 20 articles are standard. The reports of officers, amending the current fiscal year operating budget, funding any collective bargaining agreements like we just did this evening, the Neshoba Tech assessment, the Chelmsford Public Schools operating budget for the upcoming fiscal year, general government operating budget, Finance Committee Reserve Fund, the capital budget, the Sewer Enterprise Fund operating budget, the Milan Avenue Sewer Pump Station, again, talking about what we discussed earlier, Stormwater Enterprise operating budget, Forum, PEG access, golf course, authorization of annual departmental revolving funds, which is again a ministerial one, cemetery improvement fund, another ministerial one, community action program fund, again annual ministerial, a proposed general bylaw that we discussed here a few meetings back now regarding the increase of the seal of weights and measures inspection fees, and then in checking with the community development officer Evan Belansky, he says there are 2 zoning bylaw amendments that the planning board is progressing to town meeting in the spring. One has to do with reinstating a provision in the zoning bylaws that was inadvertently dropped from a previous vote at town meeting regarding non-conforming uses and structures to allow for a special permit. So again, not significant. And then another one is a zoning bylaw amendment regarding single and two-family reduction of dimensional requirements. Again, I think meant to facilitate and ease the process. We have received a request from the Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee for the town to vote to enact the specialized energy code for design and construction of buildings. That's commonly referred to now as the opt-in code under the Green Communities Act, the opt-in specialized code. Obviously, in speaking to Badri and the other committee members, they would obviously come in and make presentations to you, the Finance Committee, and to the town meeting in terms of what that would entail, because that is, a recent option for communities. And I think a couple of communities have already adopted it and are moving forward. And I'm sure more are also considering it. Community Preservation Fund, annual, funding for debt service, administration expenses, and reserves. The Conservation Commission is considering the acquisition of a minor parcel, and I say minor, less than 1.5 acre parcel off of Wilson Lane that they continue to discuss and have presented to the Community Preservation Committee. And then these others are Community Preservation Committees as well: Historic Records Preservation, Highland Park Playground Equipment Replacement, Forefather Cemetery Headstone Preservation, West Cemetery Post and Rail Fencing, Center Village Brookwalk construction, and then the relocation and preservation of the School Street Freight House. So that's sort of what we have at this point in time. As I said, I'll keep you updated as these get flushed out. And Community Preservation Committee has a couple of these still under active consideration, but by the time you are seated at your meeting just over a month from now, on the 27th of February, it should all be there and together. So that's where we're at as a start. Under the budget development, I've drafted you a brief memo. Basically summarizes really not a lot has changed since we had the meeting in December with the school committee and the finance committee. And I guess what sort of presenting it from being finalized is sort of what we knew was going to happen in December, that with the new governor coming in, we will not see her budget until March 1st, although she informed the Mass Municipal Association over the weekend that she hoped to have local aid numbers out under her proposed budget, the governor's proposed budget, by mid-February. And by mid-February, we also should have our health insurance premium increase numbers. So again, probably, 3 or so weeks from now, we should have a better sense in terms of where that's at, although again, it's still going to be subject to an ongoing process. And also we'll know from Neshoba Tech, because they'll release their budget projection at the end of this month, early February, because they need to get on schedule with the Westford Town meeting, which is scheduled for the end of March. And then again, there are still negotiations on collective bargaining that are ongoing, so hopefully those may come in the next couple of months, but we have the placeholder for it. I think the key thing that I want to emphasize, and I think we did back in December, and it shouldn't be very surprising given that we're at, is we're struggling to hang on to the level of operation and services that we have now. Everywhere you look, it's inflation, and in drafting the budget and sitting down with the department heads, the increases are what you'd expect to see. Oh, we need more money for diesel fuel. We're experiencing, supply materials costs. Even postage. Yesterday, if people aren't aware, the price of a first-class stamp went up by 5%, 3 cents. It now costs you 63 cents to mail a first-class letter. How does that matter, other than being a nice note? Well, the clerk's office that's mailing thousands of ballots for early voting and so forth, that's impacted their budget. So the bottom line is, the major funding increases are what we thought they would be. The school increase, part of which we talked earlier about the special education rate increases, the retirement system, and solid waste recycling contract, and property insurance, maintenance, vehicles, and so forth. What I can tell you is there will not be any increase in staffing or personnel levels in the general government budget. Not even a per tenth of an hour, meaning, because you get these, FTEs of 0.4, whatever. It is literally level staffing on the general government side. And not that there aren't legitimate requests, it's just that what my concern is right now is can we pull this off, honestly, because I was a little uninspired by what I heard from the new governor over the weekend. You heard about the Chapter 90 funding at $200 million per year, and then you hear great things of like, well, we're fully committed to funding the Student Opportunities Act, and we're fully funding to fund Circuit Breaker. Well, first of all, those are statutory obligations, and second of all, that's what's been in effect for the last few years. My budget is predicated on them ultimately funding at the levels that they did last year when they stepped up and funded Chapter 70 at $100 per student minimum and so forth. And I know that they're talking about the revenue picture and so forth. The problem I think that everyone's seeing, and you're seeing it everywhere else, is that light at the end of the tunnel might be a freight train called the recession coming at us.
It's not going to come.
Okay, we're hoping it doesn't, but that's the concern is there an economic slowdown?
It's not a strategy.
Hope is not a strategy, but we're grounded on these numbers, and I think I think the biggest one is, and that's why I mentioned it specifically there, was the issue of that special education tuition. Again, that was $750,000 beyond what we had in our budgetary forecast. Yeah. And if I could sleep a lot more comfortable at night if that were at least mitigated. So anyway, that's where we are in the budget, and again, I will have the details for you in terms of the line items and everything a week from tonight. But like you said, it's not a complicated story in the spreadsheets. And then the last thing, and I want to commend John Souza for not only waiting here this evening for the meeting, but also for working. This was John's carry. Over the last few months, and I'll invite John to the podium, he has worked with Ted Luder, our IT director, in back and forth conversations with David Hedison, the executive director of the Chelmsford Housing Authority, to do a shared services agreement in terms of IT. And I'm going to turn it over to John in terms of, I think, what should be a win-win for both the town and for the Housing Authority. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'd like to start by describing some of the background of how this process started. And it really started last spring with a conversation between the Housing Authority's Executive Director, David Hedison, and our IT Director, Ted Luder, and our Network Manager, Matt Hall. And Ted brought the idea forward to me, and we discussed the initial concept with the town manager at the time. It became clear to us that the Housing Authority was seeking an alternative to their contracted IT services agreement that they had with a private vendor, and we decided to explore it in greater detail with them. The Housing Authority was looking for a higher level of service and expertise in the area, so Ted and Matt had further discussions with Director Hedison to better understand get a better understanding of the Housing Authority's technology needs, and we worked on the contract during the summer and fall. So under the terms of the contract that you have in your informational packet, the town IT staff will provide technical support in areas such as network and cloud administration, and they'll also assist with their security camera surveillance system, their VoIP telephone system, their web page, and staff computers, things of that nature. In exchange for these services, the Housing Authority has agreed to pay the amounts annually to the town that are shown on page 2 of the agreement. For assuming these additional duties, both IT employees will receive a salary stipend for their work. The base contract is a 3-year agreement with 2 option years, so the total duration of the agreement is 5 years. Town Council Attorney Paul Haverty has reviewed the contract language back in the summer, and he will again review the contract form after both parties approve. The agreement has been approved by the Chelmsford Housing Authority. And as the town manager said earlier, the agreement, we feel, benefits both parties. The town of Chelmsford receives a new source of revenue, while the Chelmsford Housing Authority realizes cost savings and receives a higher level of technical assistance and support. We also believe it will foster greater cooperation and coordination between the town and the Housing Authority. For example, the Housing Authority's security cameras will be connected through the town's fiber optic network, and this will give the police department direct access, which is important during an emergency, to those cameras. Another example, Community Services Coordinator Jen Melanson was recently successfully awarded a digital equity grant, and this would help allow us to help the Housing Authority provide greater Wi-Fi access to Housing Authority residents that may be economically disadvantaged. And I want to thank our IT director and recognize our network manager, again, Ted Luter and Matt Hall, for their creativity and innovation through the efforts of developing this arrangement with the Housing Authority. I assisted with the contract writing and other aspects, but they really took the ball and had the discussions with David Hedison, and were able to do this. So we respectfully request the board approve the agreement and authorize the town authorize the town manager to execute this agreement on behalf of the town of Chelmsford. And if there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer those. Thank you.
That's
I
great.
think the only thing I'd point out is this sort of followed upon what we did with animal control with Tingsboro.
Yeah.
So it's sort of that same vein where, we've got a resource that we can augment, and it seems to be a win-win.
Well, I think you give a lot of extra utility, too, to the police station with their cameras, and it really kind of opens up the communication between a bunch of different departments.
It's a great idea.
Thank you.
So because it is an intermunicipal agreement, technically, because the Housing Authority is a separate government than the town, that needs a vote of the select board to approve the
I'm
intermunicipal
ready.
agreement. So that's why I want,
Ready for everybody to be done talking.
just like we did with Tingsboro.
I'll make a motion that we vote to approve the interagency agreement between the Chelmsford Housing Authority and the town of Chelmsford, as presented.
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Pat?
Aye.
5-0.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Nice job, John.
Thank you, John.
Good job, John.
Okay. You're up again, Paul.
Yeah, and my appointment, I'm looking for your confirmation of the appointment of Bob Schneider to an unexpired 3-year term ending on June 30th, 2023, to the Council on Aging Board. And Bob is here this evening. You want to go to the podium, Bob, just introduce himself. I think everybody knows you, but you might as well put your face out there for those who may not.
You've sat here that long.
Yeah, exactly.
I think I have a lot to give. I've been in town for a long time now. It's 4 decades, actually. So I think I know what's going on in town, and I think I have something to give, and I'm at a point in my life where I think I need to do more of that kind of thing, and I'm going to do it. Actually, I've started already working for them in the sense that there's a problem with the sign out in front of the senior center, and I've actually got it going a little bit. I'm not sure it's working today. Apparently it's not working, but I have some ideas how to fix the sign, maybe. It's been a troublesome thing for a while, I guess, so. Do the best I can, that's all I can say.
And I can tell you, Bob's application that was circulated through the Council on Aging, and they're very excited and eager to have Bob come on board to the council. So I respectfully ask for your approval.
Thank you for coming in, Bob.
Okay, good luck.
I'll make a motion that we appoint Bob Schneider to the
Council on Aging.
Council on Aging. Thanks, George. It's getting there.
For
Second?
for the term as stated. I'll add that.
For the unexpired 3-year term, expiring in June 30th of 2023.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Pat?
Aye.
5-0.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Bob.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you, Bob. Okay, next up, we have meeting minutes, the Select Board regular meeting minutes of January 9th. Are there any amendments before I take a motion? Okay, if not, we'll take the motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the Select Board regular meeting minutes for the January 9th, 2023 meeting.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Pat?
Aye.
5-0. Okay, we have select board member liaison reports and referrals next. Mark?
I'm all set, thank you.
George?
Yes, I have one. It's really nothing, just a couple of weeks ago, my daughter and I attended an event put on by his pal, which, the police athletic league, whatever, and it was a dueling piano. And I'd just like to commend Gary Hannigan and his staff. They raised a tremendous amount of money, they packed the place, and it's only one of 4 or 5 events, and it all goes back to the kids, and they do so many things for the kids in town. And Lisa Colangelo from the Classic Flowers helped them quite a bit, so I was very impressed, and it was a great turnout, and it was a lot of fun. Of course, it was my first time out. My daughter took me out for a night, so it's a great time. So I just want to congratulate Gary, and he does a great job with that pal. They raise a lot of money with their golf tournaments and various events, and it all goes back to the kids, so great.
Thank you, George.
Thank you.
Ken?
I'm all set. No, then maybe we should congratulate the DPW for doing a great job these last 2 storms. It really seems like the roads are clear and.
Yeah, and this brining system seems to be working.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, it
they
does.
couldn't do it today, because the problem is it doesn't work if there's heavy rain preceding a snowfall. But on general storms, it would just wash away. But the general storms, it seems to be taking, which is probably why the state and others were ahead of us on
Yeah,
this.
the roads are a little smoother. So it's
Can we put on their website where the brine's being used? Because someone called me today and said they were all upset because they don't want salt being used in their area. It's not supposed to be. And I said, I don't think they're.
It's actually saving salt. If
Right.
they don't do that, they're going to be throwing just.
But I said, I don't think they're going to be putting any brine down in a no-salt area. If they're, I didn't even know they existed in Chelmsford, but if maybe we just put the streets as brine's being used on, maybe you notice a difference, for what it's worth. I don't know.
Definitely on 129 at Billerica, 'cause
So anyways, thank you, DPW, for doing the job you do. Other than that, I'm good.
Okay. Pat?
Yeah, I wish I had some of that brine for my driveway this evening. Then I could be there in person with you. But
Get
maybe
your
next time.
shovel.
Yeah, just a couple things. A couple weeks ago, we had a ribbon cutting at Top Secret Science, which is in a mill up in North Chelmsford. It's a really fun place. I guess they have lots of parties for kids there, so good place to go. Also, want to congratulate our newest patrol officers, Derek Tyros and Matthew Kilmartin, who graduated from the Police Academy last week. So we'll be seeing them around town very shortly, I'm sure. And then a couple of announcements. John Souza alluded to Jen Lanson and a digital equity grant. She has stepped forward to be the town's point person on that initiative. So I'm so glad that she is doing that, and I think she was a good choice to have her do that. And the Neshoba Tech is having their annual budget presentation to local officials on February 3rd. They're not sure on the time yet, if it's going to be 9 or 9:30 a.m. That's a Friday. I will let you know once that finalizes. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Pat. I just had a couple about the planning board public hearings this week on Wednesday, January 25th. They will be opening a new public hearing for the 2 zoning changes that Paul mentioned in his reports. And the public hearing for River Neck Road will reopen and be continued this Wednesday evening. And there are updated documents posted for that. That's all I have. So if there's nothing else, I'll take a motion.
I will make a motion that we adjourn to executive session to discuss strategy with respect to litigation regarding 73 Dalton Road, 2nd Lane, 59 Carlisle Street, and Mary Ave, to discuss the strategy with respect to the collective bargaining with the Chelmsford Police Superior Officers, also known as the Sergeants Union, review of executive session minutes for January 9th, 2023, segments 1 and 2, review of held executive session minutes from December 13th, 2021, joint meeting with the school committee for potential release, review of held executive session minutes from November 21st, 2022, segment 3, for potential release, not to return.
Second.
Okay, and it is 8:25. We'll do a roll call vote. Mark?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Ken?
Aye.
Pat?
Aye.
And I vote aye. We're adjourned.
Paul, we going out of the other room?